As has already been mentioned, we're going to be continuing on with actually concluding our study over the deacon. We've already heard some excellent messages from William, who talked about the qualifications of a deacon. Nathan had an excellent lesson over what is a deacon. And so tonight we hope to conclude all those thoughts in talking about the role of the deacon. And basically what we're going to be doing is just kind of making some practical applications. What is a deacon? What do they do? What's their primary role, their purpose? What main function do they serve in God's kingdom? And so hopefully this will kind of help to, it probably won't completely cover every aspect, but it was a lot of what I could think about in terms of the role of the deacon, and hopefully it'll be beneficial to us as we examine those tonight. Here's an outline of what we hope to cover. First of all, we're going to differentiate the elder role versus the deacon role. Nathan did that already, but we'll kind of paint that picture for us as we look to establish some key aspects of what the deacon's role is. Then we'll look at the purpose of the deacon. We'll talk a little bit about the diversity that's going to be on the deacon team. We'll make a few points about that. We'll talk about the deacon's family. And then we'll talk about the role of the congregation as well. So we're not just touching on the role of the deacon, but the role that we all play within the congregation. So to start off with, I wanted to differentiate the elder role versus the deacon role. And I just kind of wanted to illustrate that for us. And hopefully I think we all have a pretty good idea of what that is, but hopefully by the end of this, we'll have a little bit better understanding of what all the elder role entails and the deacon role entails. And this will be a pretty simple explanation of each. But the primary focus of the elder is to oversee the spiritual needs of the congregation. When you think about differentiating what does the elder do versus the deacon, the elder's primarily focused about the spiritual needs of the congregation, whereas the deacon is focused primarily on the physical needs of the congregation. All those things that kind of go outside of the spiritual role, the spiritual needs, the deacon helps to see after those. Now, having said that, there is going to be a little bit of crossover. The elder's not always going to focus primarily or solely on spiritual needs. Sometimes they're going to work in other areas. There's different works they'll be involved in, and the same goes for the deacon. Even William had mentioned in his talk last Sunday about the fact that a deacon may have the opportunity and should take advantage of the opportunity to talk to someone about the gospel and sit down and have a Bible study with them. So there's going to be some crossover versus these spiritual needs and physical needs, but what I do want to point out is the primary focus is going to be spiritual for the elder, physical needs for the deacon. Now, another thing I want to point out is that and as has already been mentioned, is the fact that the elder delegates certain responsibilities to the deacon. That's going to be, and I'll have another slide after this for an example that kind of illustrates this, but the elder is in that position of authority, and there's going to be certain things that they're just not going to have the time, the resources to be able to handle, and it's those things that they need to delegate to hand off to the deacons to be able to see after those things so that the elder can be freed up to focus on other high-level issues. Then we also see that the deacon can elevate certain things to the elder. There's going to be certain situations that the deacon comes across that he's not going to be able to handle those, and so he's going to need to elevate those to the rest of the deacon team, or even if the need calls for it, to elevate it to the elders. And so we see this delegation from the elder, the elevation of issues from the deacon. Now, another point I want to make with this is that the deacon isn't always going to do works that are delegated to him. The deacon's also going to be knowing what should be done. They should know that. They should know a lot of the work that needs to be done with their day-to-day interactions with the congregation, with its members. They're going to know where the priorities lie. So they shouldn't always need to be told what to do. They should see those things that need to be addressed and to go tackle those. Another way I wanted to kind of illustrate this, and this goes back to kind of looking back to anatomy and physiology and some medical background, but just to kind of illustrate this idea further, there's the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is mainly our brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system is all the nerves that are outside of the central nervous system. And so Whenever the brain wants to send a signal to your arm to have it move, that signal travels from the brain down the spinal cord and to those nerves outside of the central nervous system. It's sending instructions to the rest of the body. And then likewise, whenever you're swinging a hammer and you happen to hit your thumb, that same nerve is going to send a signal back up to the brain and give it feedback. And so when there's an issue, when there's a problem, the body's going to make the brain aware of that. So I just wanted to illustrate it this way, that in this illustration, the elders serve as kind of the brain of the congregation, and they delegate certain things, certain instructions to the rest of the congregation, to the deacons, who then see after the needs of the body. And then likewise, they will identify issues and elevate those back to the elders. Hopefully that helps to differentiate these two different roles. Also wanted to point out, this is something that Aaron included in his lesson over the deacon that he gave last year. But the reason why a lot of elderships fail is because they don't delegate to the deacons enough. And so delegation is very important for the elders to be successful in their roles. And then also, it's equally important for the deacons to delegate to the congregation as well. There's going to be certain things that it shouldn't just fall on the deacon to accomplish those. We've got to utilize all the resources that we have available within the congregation. And so the deacon will play a role in helping to include others in this important work. And so what are some key aspects of the deacon role? And as William mentioned, as Nathan mentioned, the number one word that comes up when you think about deacons is service. Service is the full epitome of what the deacon role is. It is a service role. And these are just a few examples of some of the things that the deacons may be involved in as far as different works. They're tending to the church grounds, whatever needs the building itself and the upkeep of the building, different repairs that need to be made, tending to the church grounds, preparations for meetings. We got a meeting coming up, and a few of us were gathered back looking at some of the things that needed to take place at the shelter, just some things that needed to be removed. It's different things like that that they'll be involved with. They'll be looking into other members' needs and identifying those. It's in their day-to-day conversations as they go from house to house, or just picking up the phone and calling members, getting to know them. They'll be able to easily identify their needs. They may have issues with their property. Their yard may need mowed. They may have certain financial needs that come up. So easily identifying some of those things and being able to intervene for them, or if it's something they can't handle, getting the other deacons involved in. And dealing with that, dealing with all of these things, of course, in a confidential manner. Identifying different spiritual needs as well. That's going to be key to the deacon's role. So all of these things, looking at what do the members need? And essentially just asking the question, what does the congregation need? What are the needs of it, and how can I respond to it? That's essentially the question the deacon asks. But also another key important aspect of their role is that they facilitate the ability for others to get involved in the work. I think we've got a lot of people here that want to be more involved, but they just don't know how. And I think that'll be a good talent for the deacons, a good role for them to play, is to get others involved and to help them identify the things that they can accomplish in the Lord's work. Another key aspect of the deacon's role is relationships, and this is what it all essentially boils down to. Relationships in regards to how well they interact with the elders, how well they receive feedback, how well they receive instruction, their relationship to the congregation and to all of its members, the relationships to the visitors, and they're going to be essentially some of the first people that visitors may meet as they come in the door, and greeting visitors, helping them feel welcome at the congregation if they're here for a meeting and they don't have a place to stay, maybe interacting with them and coordinating for that person to be able to have a place to stay while they're here. Also, their relationship with the community as well. Sometimes deacons are going to be kind of the face of the congregation. We all essentially are. As members of Chapel Grove, we're all the face of Chapel Grove as we go out into the community. But I think our elders and deacons even more so. And I like to think of it as the word ambassador. They're ambassadors of the congregation. We all are. But these positions of authority are even more so. And so their relationship, their standing in the community is going to be very important. And then, of course, how well do they work with the other deacons that are on the team? Each deacon's going to be doing some individual work. They may be doing some work as a team. They may pair up. You may have someone who's less experienced and more experienced working together on a project. So they need to have good working relationships with all of the deacons. And when we think about the deacon and that role, I think a lot of times we may have just that perception of, it kind of just being strictly a service role that is basically a catch-all for things that just need to be taken care of. But when you look at this, all of these interactions that they have, the deacon role seems to be a crossing point or kind of a crossroads of multiple relationships. They're interacting with the elders, with the congregation, with visitors, community members. So it really is a crossroads of multiple relationships, and they serve an integral role within the congregation. And one important point, this can go without saying, but I think for completeness, it does need to be said that having deacons does not excuse the rest of the congregation from fulfilling their roles and doing what they can do. It's certainly a blessing to have elders, to have deacons, but this isn't a sit back and let the good times roll. It's everybody needs to be taking part in this work and doing what we can. Deacons obviously are servants, but they are not the only servants in the congregation. We all are servants. And so somebody might say, well, if we're all supposed to serve, then what purpose do deacons fulfill if we're all to serve in the congregation? Well, I think we've made that point a little bit throughout it, but let's build on it a little bit. The purpose of deacons helps to maximize the potential of a congregation. Some of the points that we've already looked at, but to build on those, identifying and fulfilling any unmet needs. When we think about the responsibilities that fall on all of us, sometimes if it falls on everybody, a lot of people may think, well, somebody else will take care of that. It's something we're all aware of. But if everybody has that mindset, then that may not get taken care of. And the deacon helps to fulfill that role because essentially for these tasks that we're talking about, the buck stops with the deacon. And nothing will slip past them. It'll be their responsibility to make sure all these needs are met and that they will be fulfilled and won't be forgotten. So they'll help to identify and fulfill any unmet needs. As we've already mentioned, they'll help to alleviate the elders of various tasks as well, so that they can handle more higher level priorities. And also having deacons, having elders, all of this is a sign of mature church leadership. Brother Aaron mentioned that in his lesson over the deacon. But having these offices filled is certainly a blessing for the congregation, and we need to certainly enjoy this time that we're in at Chapel Grove, being able to have deacons and have these servants and these people to direct us. And so it's definitely a sign of mature church leadership. And then also, it's part of the cycle of future leadership development. If you're selected to be a deacon, that's certainly something to not take lightly, but it's also not something to take for granted. As a deacon, you'll take a spot on what John Maxwell calls the leadership table. You'll be able to enter into those discussions with other deacons, with other elders, and gain insight that will greatly help you in building your understanding of various leadership-related issues, how to handle those. You'll be gaining insight from the elders on how they tackle those issues, so that if someday you're in that same position, you'll have a blueprint and a background on how to fulfill those needs and tackle those issues. And so those are some of the purposes behind the deacons. I'll now want to touch on just briefly the diversity that's going to be on the deacon team. This goes without saying, but no two deacons are going to be alike. When we think about who's going to be selected, or when we think about that image we may have in our mind of who we think a deacon is, they're going to have multiple characteristics to differentiate them. There's going to be an age range for the deacon team. They're going to be separated by a few decades perhaps. They're going to have different talents and skills. They're going to be able to bring different things to the table as far as what they can offer in service to the congregation. They're going to be of varied backgrounds, and they're going to have multiple experience levels. So they're going to have multiple aspects of things that they have taken work in, that they've taken the time to learn and build up, and they'll be able to bring those skills and those talents, those abilities into the Lord's service within this role. And diversity, of course, is going to help to maximize the potential of the deacon team and also help to maximize the potential of the congregation. One quote that I love, it's a very simple quote from John Maxwell, but it's probably one of my favorites from him. And it's just a simple but profound quote that says, "None of us is as smart as all of us." And so having that diversity on the team, having the diversity we have within the congregation, skill levels, backgrounds, experience, it's going to help to raise us all to a higher ground. And so now we want to talk a little bit about the deacon's family. We'll look at 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 11 through 13. Brother Nathan and William, they've both touched on the qualifications in 1 Timothy chapter 3. They both read also Acts chapter 6. This will be the only passage we have this evening. Might have one other one. I think I included one other one. But 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 11 through 13. There the Bible says, "Likewise their wives must be reverent, not slanderers, temperate, faithful in all things. Let deacons be the husbands of one wife, ruling their children and their own houses well. For those who have served well as deacons obtain for themselves a good standing and great boldness in the faith, which is in Christ Jesus." So I think it's important to look at the deacon's family as well. You know, becoming a deacon is an endeavor that impacts not just the man himself, but also his family. And it's not something to be taken lightly. And as we've looked here, the qualifications for the deacon's wives, they must be reverent. They've got to be respectful. Respectful, of course, of the deacon, but also respectful of the work that they're undertaking. They shouldn't be slanderers. They shouldn't have, shouldn't be a gossiper. They should be temperate. They've got to have some patience in this work and faithful in all things. Those are, I think it's important to point out that there's qualifications placed on the wives of deacons, because a deacon's wife is going to be critical to his successful service to the church. The deacon's wife, she's going to be hospitable. There may be times where the deacon's hosting a Bible study or hosting someone for a meeting. There's going to be some hospitality that's required. The deacon's wife also offers a different perspective. There's going to be some issues that the deacon encounters that are going to be of a confidential nature, and so those things should be kept confidential and maintain that trust. But there may be other things that come up that he gets his wife's perspective about, and she's going to be able to offer a different viewpoint of these issues and help to provide maybe a little bit of clarity to the deacon as well as they approach that work. And also, they're going to have increased responsibilities at times. There's times where the deacon's going to be working and helping someone else out, and that may leave a little bit more responsibility at home for the wife to tackle. And so that's just something that all wives of deacons should have a heads up about. And all the men in the congregation that are already essentially doing this work, and their wives too, you're already aware of these things, but just wanted to kind of bring these things out. And so the last thing I want to touch on is the role of the congregation. We've mentioned the role of the man himself, the deacon, but the role that we all play within the congregation. We're all to respect the men who are chosen. We're all to respect the elders that we've set in place, and we're all to respect the deacons that are going to be chosen as well. They're taking on forms of service for us. They've made sacrifices within their lives. They've done a lot of work to get themselves to the point to be even eligible to be able to serve in this capacity. So we need to respect them that are going to be chosen. And we also need to be willing to work alongside them. As I've already mentioned, all of this work is our responsibility. The deacons are just another level of being able to facilitate this work getting done in a more efficient manner. And we need to do it all in unity. 1 Corinthians 12:12, there the Bible says, "For as the body is one and has many members, but all the members of that one body, being many, are one body, so also is Christ." Having this leadership in place is going to help to facilitate greater unity within the congregation, and so we need to embrace that. And then just a couple of other things. As I mentioned, this is an exciting time for us at Chapel Grove. It's not every day that you have elders established and that you have the prospect of establishing deacons as well. And so it's an exciting time that we're heading into, an exciting chapter in this congregation's history. And I also want to make a point of the importance of our actions today. As we reflect on this church's history, when we think about the leadership that's been established in the past, the sacrifices they made, and the advances they made in being able to help us to get to where we're at today. When we think about future congregations, future members of this congregation, we need to realize the responsibility that we have with our actions today. They're going to face multiple challenges. A lot of times we're thinking about simply our children's generation, but we need to be thinking about their children's generation and all the generations to come. And the things that they're going to be going through, those are battles that, we're not going to be able to fight for them. All that we're simply going to be able to do is offer them a foundation and a blueprint upon which to build. And it's our responsibility to give them the strongest foundation possible. So I'll leave that with you. I hope it's been beneficial. That's all the thoughts that I had prepared, but I do want to open it up for any questions, if a brother has anything.
Yep. I just want to make a statement. You had talked about the central nervous system and all that, and got me thinking when you said that. I guess this is brain surgery, huh? But the idea that the deacon's role is more physical than spiritual, I think, in my studies, that's something I kind of come across. But then as I've talked to elders in other congregations, one with my uncle, and he told me, well, don't be too hard pressed on the fact that the deacon's role is all physical. And I think it goes to the fact that you can't separate your spiritual life from your physical life. And it's kind of like in sports, when you're not mentally prepared, you're not going to perform physically in the athletic or whatever. And there's just naturally crossover between your spiritual depression, maybe a member's spiritual state of mind, where they're at, maybe with sin in their life, and how they're doing physically. They're going to feed off of each one another. Yeah. And so I just want to emphasize the fact that the deacon's going to he needs to be a mature, spiritually minded man that is faithful in the mystery of godliness, I think as Paul says, so that he can have a ready response to direct people to the elders when necessary, or to give them that little piece of spiritual help, as a deacon. Yeah,
that's a very good point. Yeah. And like I'd mentioned, there's definitely some crossover, primarily focused on the physical needs, but you're right, there's often crossover or, spiritual impacting multiple factors within their lives. So that's a great point. Appreciate you sharing that. Anything else? You can't let me off that easy. All right.